No one on that set was laughing, not yet. The day hadn't gone wrong, but it hadn't gone right either. The kind of morning where tension settled in early, without explanation. Cameras stood ready, untouched. Lights burned hot above an empty mark on the floor waiting. Someone important hadn't arrived yet. Whispers moved faster than footsteps. He's late. He always does this. He thinks he owns the place. But they weren't talking about Dean Martin. Dean was already there. He stood near the back of the soundstage, half in shadow, watching the crew prepare. Hands in his pockets. Expression calm. He didn't interrupt. Didn't announce himself. He never did. Dean liked to arrive before the noise, not after. Across the set, a powerful actor paced. Sharp movements. Restless energy. He glanced around again, irritated. Where is he? The actor snapped. A production assistant hesitated. Mr. Martin's been here for a while. That answer landed wrong. The actor turned slowly. What? The assistant pointed. Dean Martin stood quietly near the props table, jacket open, tie loosened, looking more like a man observing life than preparing to act. The actor stared. Something about that posture annoyed him immediately. Not lazy. Not careless, unbothered. Men who needed control hated that look. The director called out, "Let's get ready." Dean walked to his mark without hurry. No rush. No resistance. The actor watched him closely now, evaluating. Some men break others by raising their voices. Some by belittling them in public. This one preferred humiliation served casually, like a joke. Well, the actor said loudly, at least you decided to join us before lunch. A few people laughed, quick, nervous. Dean didn't. He looked at the actor briefly. Then at the director, ready. They expected a smile. A joke. A deflection. Dean gave them none, and without knowing it yet, the room had already chosen a side. The cameras hadn't rolled yet, but the performance had already begun. The actor adjusted his cuffs dramatically, making sure eyes were on him. Dean stood still at his mark, script folded in one hand, listening. The director raised his voice. Quiet on set. The room obeyed for a moment, then the actor spoke, too loud for a whisper, too casual to be professional. You know, he said, looking at Dean, this scene works better when both men actually mean what they're saying. The implication hung there. Dean didn't look up. He didn't look away either. He simply said, let's try it. The director hesitated, then nodded. Rolling. The clapper snapped. Action. The actor charged into his lines with force, sharp movements, loud pauses, deliberate dominance. He stepped closer to Dean than the blocking required. Testing. Dean stayed where he was. When his turn came, he spoke softly. Not weak. Measured. The contrast was immediate. Somewhere behind the camera, a grip shifted his weight. A makeup assistant frowned. This wasn't imbalanced. It was control. Cut, the director said. The actor sighed loudly. That's not right. The director looked at him. What's not? He nodded toward Dean. He's barely in it. Dean finally looked up. Is that a problem? He asked. The actor smiled thinly. For this picture? Yeah. Dean considered that. Then, we can go again. No challenge. No defense. The actor laughed. That's the spirit. The scene reset this time. The actor rushed Dean's cues, cutting him off, crowding his space. The lines overlapped. Deliberately, Dean adjusted without complaint. He waited. Then delivered his line with perfect timing. It landed harder than before. The director smiled, briefly. Unintentionally, the actor noticed, his jaw tightened. Cut. He snapped. The director looked up, annoyed now. You don't call cut. I know when a scene's wrong, the actor said. Dean folded his script. That wasn't wrong, he said calmly. It was different. The word different hit like a needle. The actor stepped closer. You always this, relaxed? Dean met his eyes. Yes. The director cleared his throat. Let's take 5. The break scattered the crew. The actor lit a cigarette, pacing. He spoke loudly enough for the room to hear. Some people mistake charm for talent. No one responded. Dean sat on a wooden chair, unbothered. A young crew member approached quietly. Mr. Martin, you want anything? Dean smiled. Coffee'd be nice. The simplicity of the request unsettled the actor. This was supposed to get under Dean's skin. It wasn't. The actor crushed the cigarette under his shoe and walked past Dean. You know, he said, if you didn't have that smile, nobody would take you seriously. Dean looked up at him. Then it's doing its job, he said, not sarcastic. Not defensive if factual, the actor scoffed and walked away. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The director called them back. The room felt different now. Quieter. As if the noise had exhausted itself, the actor delivered his lines with restraint this time. Less force. More calculation. Dean matched him, not by copying, but by grounding the scene. The power shifted subtly. The director noticed, the crew felt it. When the scene ended, the director nodded once. That works. The actor looked stunned. Dean said nothing. As the crew reset, whispers spread, he's not reacting. That's worse. Yeah, for the other guy. The actor stood alone now, staring at the floor. For the first time that day, his voice had nowhere to land, and he hated it, because men like him didn't lose when someone fought back, they lost when someone refused to play. By mid-afternoon, the set had changed, not physically. The lights, cameras, and props were the same, but the air was different. Every whisper, every step, carried weight. Dean Martin stood quietly near the edge of the scene. Script in hand. Watching. Listening. The actor wasn't done. He approached Dean during a rehearsal break. Come on, he said, loud enough for half the crew to hear. Loosen up, Dino. Don't take life so seriously. Dean didn't flinch. He didn't even smile. Thank you, he said evenly. That's appreciated. The actor stepped closer. Or are you scared someone might see the real you? A ripple ran through the crew. Eyes widened. People leaned in. This was no longer playful. This was personal. Dean folded his script. Slowly. Not dramatic. Not defensive, just deliberate. He adjusted his jacket and looked at the actor. Not angry. Not amused, calm. Measured. I think everyone in the room already sees who I am, Dean said softly. The actor laughed, sharp, forced, loud. Yeah, right. You hide behind that charm, that smile. But when it matters, you freeze. Dean didn't respond, he didn't move. He simply let the words hang. The room felt heavy. The crew shifted uncomfortably. Even the director froze. It was a gamble. The actor expected reaction. Any reaction. Dean gave none. Then the actor tried again. Seriously, man, don't you get tired of pretending? Dean's reply was measured, quiet, and deadly. I don't pretend. A simple statement. No flourish. No emotion. The actor's grin faltered. Or maybe you just know how to play the room, he said. Dean finally spoke again. I know how to stay in it without losing myself. The actor's jaw tightened. For the first time, he realized Dean Martin was not a man you could manipulate. The director stepped in. That's enough, he said firmly, but Dean didn't need the director. His presence alone shifted the balance. The actor, previously the center of energy, suddenly felt smaller in the space. Dean moved back slightly. Took his mark. Prepared for the next take. When the cameras rolled, Dean delivered his lines perfectly. Timing, inflection, presence, flawless. The actor tried to dominate, tried to improvise over Dean again. Dean didn't interrupt. He stayed calm. Waited. And his response, soft but precise, landed harder than any shout could have. A cut, the director said. That's good. The actor's face went pale. No one applauded. No one spoke. The power on set had shifted quietly but completely. Dean Martin didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He didn't even glare. He simply existed, solid, confident, untouchable. For the first time, everyone understood you can't break Dean Martin, not with words, not with noise. You only see the effect of his silence, and that silence was louder than any insult. The set had grown quiet, not because cameras stopped. Not because lights dimmed. Because everyone felt the tension in the air. The actor, frustrated, muttered under his breath. No one listened. Except Dean Martin. Dean didn't raise an eyebrow. He didn't even turn. He had already decided how this would end. The director called a break. "Let's take 5, he said. The actor scoffed. 5 minutes won't change anything." Dean didn't respond. He rose from his chair slowly. One hand folded over his script. The other straightened his jacket, then he began to walk, not hastily. Not dramatically. But with a confidence that drew every eye. Step by step, Dean moved toward the exit. The crew froze. Cameras tilted slightly as operators instinctively followed him. Even the director couldn't hide his astonishment. The actor stopped pacing. "Where are you going?" he demanded. Dean didn't turn. He didn't shout. "I'm leaving this moment where it belongs," he said quietly. "On the set." The words barely carried to the edge of the room, but everyone heard them. Dean Martin walked past the actor without acknowledgement. Not an insult. Not a glance. The silence he left behind spoke louder than any argument ever could. The director finally broke the stillness. "Take 10, he ordered. But no one moved immediately. The actor's confidence had vanished. For the first time, he felt small in a room he used to dominate. Dean reached the trailer. He didn't slam the door. He didn't fume. He simply closed it behind him. Inside, Dean poured a glass of water. Sipped slowly. Watched the sunlight fall across the trailer floor. He had not raised his voice. Had not insulted. Had not even scowled, but the entire set had been reminded of who held the power outside. The crew whispered among themselves. He just shut the whole thing down. And didn't even try. Wow, he didn't react at all. By the time Dean returned, the actor had calmed, barely. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Dean didn't lecture. He didn't explain. He simply performed, and when the cameras rolled again, the actor found himself on unfamiliar ground. For the first time, he wasn't the dominant presence. Dean Martin was, and he didn't need to say a word to prove it. Hollywood was buzzing, but not in the way you'd expect. No press release. No gossip column, just whispers. From studio offices to quiet lounges. From private dinners to late-night phone calls, he walked off the set. No shouting. Nothing. The story traveled slowly. But every person who heard it added a little flourish. A little awe. Producers called agents, not to reprimand Dean. To book him. Can he work like that every day? They asked. Steady, calm, in control? Yes. He could. Word reached directors across town. He didn't fight, they'd say. He just exists. And that's exactly what made people listen. The actor? He didn't enjoy the story spreading. His calls were cautious, polite, rarely assertive. Even he realized he had lost the invisible game. Dean never entered in the first place. Dean didn't speak to the press. He didn't boast. He didn't explain. He let the story breathe on its own. At studio lunches, his colleagues couldn't help mentioning it. He didn't even respond. That's worse than fighting. They all knew who won without a single argument. Even Frank Sinatra heard about it. On a flight from Vegas to LA, he chuckled quietly. Figures, he said. Dean doesn't need to prove anything. Months later, a young actor watched Dean on a different set. Another tense confrontation. Another loud, challenging co-star, and once again, Dean didn't react. He delivered his lines perfectly. He listened. He existed calmly. The lesson spread quietly but unmistakably. If you tried to humiliate Dean Martin, you discovered the power of silence. If you tried to provoke him, he showed that confidence isn't about volume, and the Hollywood hierarchy took note. Directors respected him. Cameras obeyed him. The people who used to mock now adjusted. Without a word, it became legend, not as a story of confrontation. Not as gossip. But as a lesson. You didn't break Dean Martin. You didn't even touch him. You simply witnessed the effect of a man who knew his worth. By the end of the year, the tale was being repeated across studios. Remember that scene on Soundstage 7? People whispered. That's how Dean does it. Even in private, the story served as a warning: respect Dean Martin, or watch your own power crumble quietly. Years later, Hollywood still whispered about that set, not because anyone shouted, not because fights broke out, but because a man had chosen silence, and it had spoken louder than words ever could. Dean Martin never sought the story. He didn't need headlines. He didn't give interviews. He didn't dramatize events. He simply existed. The lesson was obvious to anyone who watched carefully: power isn't measured by noise. Respect isn't won by aggression. Authority doesn't need to be proven, it is shown through presence. Every actor who tried to provoke him, every director who watched him handle tension, every crew member who witnessed it, they remembered the silence. Years later, one of the producers told a reporter, "I learned more about leadership from Dean Martin than anyone else in my career. It wasn't because Dean shouted, or demanded, or insulted. It was because he understood boundaries. He understood control. He understood himself." Dean didn't just survive the confrontation. He taught a room full of people a lesson without raising his voice: stand firm. Don't fight unnecessary battles, let others reveal themselves, know your worth. The actor who had tried to humiliate him never forgot. He realized, too late, that intimidation only works on those who fear it. Dean Martin? He didn't need to fear anyone. Years later, when people watched old films, they didn't just see the performance. They felt it. The calm confidence. The authority in silence. The subtle dominance of someone who could command respect without demanding it. That day on the set became legend, not for what was said, but for what wasn't said. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was violent, but because it was true. And in Hollywood, truth travels further than gossip. Dean Martin's silence was his power. His calm was his weapon. His dignity was his legacy, and that's why no one expected him to react. And that's why no one ever forgot it, because in a world obsessed with noise, Dean Martin showed that real strength is quiet, and sometimes, silence breaks everything.